Alina Martinez had been walking for 3 hours in the pouring rain, her thin jacket soaked through and her worn sneakers squelching with every step on the cracked sidewalk. The storm had caught her completely off guard as she left the unemployment office, where she had spent the morning filling out paperwork that would probably lead nowhere, just like all the others before it. Her apartment was still 12 blocks away, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. Water dripped steadily from her dark hair, running down her face, and mixing with tears she tried hard to hide from the few people hurrying past with their umbrellas and raincoats. Lena had sold her umbrella 3 weeks ago, along with her winter coat and most of her jewelry, just to pay for groceries. The small town of Cedar Falls had once been prosperous, with factories that employed half the population and main streets lined with thriving businesses. But one by one, the factories had closed, the businesses had shuttered. The people had either left for bigger cities or stayed behind to struggle with what remained. Lena had stayed partly because she couldn't afford to leave, but mostly because this was the only place that had ever felt like home. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself, though it did little good against the cold October rain. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her that she had only eaten a piece of toast that morning, saving the last of her peanut butter for tomorrow's breakfast. The job interview she had walked to in this weather had been a disappointment, just like all the others. The manager had taken one look at her outdated resume and faded clothes and had given her the same polite rejection she had heard dozens of times before. Alina was 28 years old, but lately she felt much older. The past 2 years since, losing her job at the local newspaper had worn her down in ways she never expected. She had always been optimistic, always believed that hard work and determination would eventually pay off. But month after month of rejections, overdue bills, and lonely nights had chipped away at that optimism until some days she barely recognized herself. The rain grew heavier, forcing her to take shelter under the awning of an old bookstore that had been closed for over a year. She stood there, shivering, watching the water cascade down the empty storefront windows, when she noticed something she had never seen before. Despite walking this street countless times, tucked between the bookstore and a long-abandoned diner, was the narrowest house she had ever seen. It couldn't have been more than 12 feet wide. It's painted a soft blue-gray that somehow managed to look welcoming despite the dreary weather. Warm yellow light glowed from the windows, and smoke curled up from a small chimney, creating the kind of cozy scene that belonged on a Christmas card. Alina had lived in Cedar Falls her entire life, had walked down this street hundreds of times, but she could have sworn this house had never been there before. It seemed impossible, but there it was, squeezed into a space she was certain had been empty just yesterday. The rain intensified again, and Alina realized she couldn't stay under the bookstore awning much longer. The overhang was narrow, and water was beginning to drip through the worn fabric, soaking her even more. She looked at the narrow house again, noticed a small porch with a dry space that would provide better shelter. As she approached the house, Alina could hear soft music coming from inside. It sounded like classical piano, something gentle and melancholy that seemed to match her mood perfectly. The porch was indeed dry, and she huddled against the front door, grateful for even this small respite from the storm. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine being warm and dry again. Tried to remember what it felt like to have hope for the future. The music from inside the house seemed to wrap around her like a blanket, and for the first time in weeks, she felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Alina must have been standing there longer than she realized, because suddenly the music stopped and she heard footsteps approaching the door from inside. Panic filled her chest as she realized how this must look: a soaking wet woman lurking on someone's porch, taking shelter without permission. She quickly stepped back, preparing to return to the rain and continue her soggy journey home. The door opened before she could move away, revealing a man who looked to be in his early 40s, with kind eyes and graying hair that suggested he had seen his share of difficult times. He was wearing a thick sweater and holding a steaming mug, and he looked at Alina with concern rather than suspicion. "Oh my," he said softly, taking in her soaked appearance in obvious distress. "You look absolutely frozen. How long have you been out in this weather?" Alina felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I'm sorry for standing on your porch," she said quickly, water still dripping from her hair. "I was just trying to get out of the rain for a minute. I'll leave now." The man stepped out onto the porch, seemingly unbothered by the rain that immediately began soaking his sweater. He studied Elena's face with eyes that seemed to see far more than most people bothered to look for. "You don't need to leave," he said gently. "In fact, I was just thinking how lonely this old house gets during storms like this. Would you like to come in and dry off? I just made coffee, and I have more than I could possibly drink by myself." Lena stared at him in surprise. In a world that had become increasingly suspicious and closed off, especially in a struggling town where everyone was focused on their own survival, this stranger was inviting her into his home. She opened her mouth to politely decline, to say that she couldn't possibly impose, but something in his expression stopped her. "If kindness won't hurt, come in," he whispered. "We're in." There was something in the way he said it that made Alina believe he understood exactly what she was going through. For a moment, they stood there, looking at each other, while the rain continued to pour around them. Alina saw no judgment in his eyes, no calculation about what she might want or what helping her might cost him. She saw only genuine human kindness, something that had become so rare in her life that she had almost forgotten what it looked like. "I don't want to be any trouble," she said quietly. The man smiled. It was the kind of smile that reached his eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. "Trouble? On a day like this, you'd be doing me a favor? Come in out of the rain?" Alina hesitated for just a moment longer before stepping across the threshold into the warmest, most welcoming space she had entered in months. The narrow house was like stepping into another world entirely, filled with soft lamplight, comfortable furniture, the lingering scent of coffee, and something that smelled like homemade bread. The man closed the door behind her, shutting out the cold rain and the harsh realities of the world outside. "I'm Samuel," he said, hanging her dripping jacket on a hook by the door. "Samuel Chen, and you look like you could use a warm drink and a place to sit by the fire." "Alina," she replied, suddenly aware of how she must look with her wet hair plastered to her head and her clothes clinging uncomfortably to her body. "Alina Martinez." "I really don't want to drip all over your floors." Samuel waved away her concern with a gentle smile. "Floors can be mopped. People can't be so easily fixed when they catch pneumonia from standing in the rain too long. Here, let me get you a towel." Alina found herself in a living room that seemed impossibly spacious for such a narrow house. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, and a small fireplace crackled cheerfully in one corner. The furniture was worn but comfortable looking, the kind of pieces that invited you to curl up with a good book and forget about the world for a while. Samuel returned with a thick, soft towel that smelled like lavender fabric softener. "The bathroom is just down the hall if you'd like to dry off properly," he offered. "I can put your clothes in the dryer while we wait for the storm to pass." "Oh, I couldn't," Alina protested, though the offer was incredibly tempting. "I've already imposed enough," Lena Samuel said gently. "When was the last time someone did something kind for you without expecting anything in return?" Alina stood there with the towel in her hands, trying to remember the last time someone had offered her help simply because she needed it. The realization that she couldn't come up with a recent example made her chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "Then let me," Samuel said simply. "Let someone be kind to you today." 20 minutes later, Alina emerged from the small but immaculately clean bathroom, wearing an oversized sweater and sweatpants that Samuel had left outside the door. Her wet clothes were spinning in the dryer in what she assumed was the basement, and she felt more human than she had in weeks. Samuel was in the kitchen, which opened directly onto the living room, stirring something that smelled absolutely heavenly. In a large pot on the stove, the narrow house seemed to make every space serve double duty, but it was done so cleverly that nothing felt cramped or cluttered. "Vegetable soup," he explained when he saw her looking. "I always make too much, and it's perfect for a day like this." "I hope you don't mind eating with a stranger." Lena's stomach growled audibly at the mention of food, and she felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I should probably head home soon," she said, though the thought of going back out into the rain, back to her cold apartment with its empty refrigerator, filled her with dread. "The storm isn't letting up," Samuel observed, glancing toward the window where rain was still streaming down the glass. And even if it were, your clothes won't be dry for another hour. Please, stay and eat. I was just thinking how quiet it gets in this house when the weather keeps everyone indoors. Alina looked around the cozy space, at the books and the fire. And this kind man who seemed genuinely happy to have her company? Do you live here alone? She asked. Samuel nodded, ladling soup into 2 bowls. For about 3 years now. I moved here after my wife died. Cancer. We had always talked about finding a small town where we could slow down and really appreciate life, but we never got the chance. So I came here to do it for both of us. I'm sorry for your loss, Alina, said softly. Thank you. Margaret would have liked you, I think. She always said that. You could tell a lot about a person by how they handled being caught in the rain. She would have said that. Anyone who keeps walking instead of giving up has the kind of strength that matters. They sat at a small round table by the window, watching the rain create patterns on the glass while they ate the most delicious soup Alina had tasted in months. Samuel was an easy conversationalist, asking gentle questions about her life without prying, sharing stories about his work as a retired librarian and his attempts to learn gardening. I've been trying to grow tomatoes in the back garden, he said with a self-deprecating laugh. Margaret was the one with the green thumb. Organize any library system you can imagine, but I can't seem to keep a plant alive for more than a few weeks. My grandmother grew the most amazing tomatoes, Alina found herself saying. She used to say it was all about talking to them, treating them like they were part of the family. She swore they could sense when someone cared about them. Your grandmother. Sounds like a wise woman. She was. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. She always said that kindness was the only thing that really mattered in life, that everything else was just details. Samuel set down his spoon and looked at Alina with those perceptive eyes. She sounds like someone who understood what life is really about. Do you still have her? Alina shook her head. She passed away 5 years ago. Sometimes I feel like I lost my compass when she died, like I've been wandering around ever since, trying to find my way back to the person she taught me to be. Grief has a way of making us feel lost, Samuel said gently. But the person she taught you to be is still there, Alina. Sometimes it just takes time to find our way back to ourselves. They finished their meal in comfortable silence, and Alina realized that this was the first time in months that she had felt truly relaxed. The warmth of the house, the kindness of this stranger, the simple pleasure of a hot meal shared with another human being. It all combined to create a sense of peace she had almost forgotten was possible. Outside, the rain continued to fall. But inside Samuel's narrow house, Alina felt safe from the storm in more ways than one. After lunch, Samuel showed Alina around his remarkable house, and she began to understand how he had managed to create such a sense of space within such narrow confines. Every room flowed naturally into the next, with clever built-in storage, and furniture that served multiple purposes. But more than the physical space, it was the feeling of the house that captivated her. Every corner seemed to hold traces of love and careful attention. Margaret and I designed this layout together, Samuel explained as they climbed a narrow staircase to the 2nd floor. She was an architect, and I was obsessed with maximizing every inch of space. We spent months planning how to make a small space feel infinite. The 2nd floor held a bedroom, a small office lined with more books, and a tiny bathroom with a clawfoot tub that somehow fit perfectly under a slanted ceiling. Everything was immaculate but lived in, comfortable without being cluttered. Like a ship, Alina said wonderingly. Everything has its place, but it doesn't feel cramped at all. That's exactly what Margaret said when we finished the drawings. She said it would be like living on the most beautiful ship in the world, with everything you needed within arm's reach. Alina could hear the love in Samuel's voice when he spoke about his late wife. But she also heard something else, a loneliness, that she recognized because it matched her own. The house was beautiful and welcoming. She could sense the quiet emptiness that came from living alone after sharing life with someone special. Do you miss having people around? She asked gently. As they made their way back downstairs, Samuel considered the question carefully before answering. I do. Margaret filled this house with laughter and music and friends who would drop by just to talk. After she died, I thought I wanted the quiet. But quiet and lonely aren't the same thing, are they? Elena shook her head. No, they're not. I've been living alone for 2 years now, and some days the silence feels so heavy I can barely breathe. They settled back in the living room, where the fire had died down to glowing embers. Samuel added another log and stirred the flames back to life, while Elena curled up in an armchair that seemed designed for reading and thinking. "Can I ask you something?" Samuel said, settling into the chair across from her. "When you were standing on my porch earlier, you looked like you were carrying the weight of the world. What's been happening in your life?" Elena felt the familiar urge to deflect, to give the standard polite answers that people expected when they asked how you were doing. But something about Samuel's genuine concern and the safety of this warm house made her want to tell the truth for once. "I lost my job 2 years ago," she said slowly. "The newspaper where I worked closed down, like so many others. I've been looking for work ever since, but there's not much left in this town. I'm behind on rent, I can barely afford groceries. And today, I walked 3 hours in the rain to another job interview that went nowhere." Samuel listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned as she continued. "But it's not just the money," Elena went on, surprised by her own honesty. "It's feeling like I don't matter, like I'm invisible. When you don't have a job or money or prospects, people stop seeing you as a person. They look right through you. Or worse, they look at you like you're dangerous or lazy or somehow responsible for everything that's gone wrong." "That must be incredibly isolating," Samuel said quietly. "It is. Some days I feel like I'm disappearing, like if I died tomorrow. No one would even notice I was gone." Elena's voice caught slightly as she spoke, and she looked down at her hands to avoid seeing pity in Samuel's eyes. But when she looked up, she didn't see pity. She saw understanding and compassion, and something else that took her a moment too. Recognition. "I felt like that after Margaret died," Samuel said softly. "Like I had become invisible, like the world just went on without noticing that half of me was missing. Friends stopped calling because they didn't know what to say. Colleagues retired and moved away. I would go days without speaking to another human being. Is that why you moved here?" "Partly. But also because I thought maybe in a smaller place, it would be easier to matter again. In a big city, you can disappear into the crowd. In a town like Cedar Falls, maybe there's still room for people to see each other." Lena looked around the cozy room, thinking about Samuel's words. "But you still spend a lot of time alone." But there's a difference between choosing solitude and having it forced on you. When I want company, I go to the library or the coffee shop or volunteer at the community center. When I want to be alone, I come home to this house and remember Margaret and all the good times we had." "That sounds peaceful," Elena said, and meant it. "It can be. But today when I heard someone on my porch, when I saw you standing there looking so lost and cold, I realized how much I've missed having someone to take care of. Margaret used to say that I was happiest when I was helping someone, when I felt useful." Elena studied Samuel's face, seeing the kindness that seemed to radiate from him like warmth from the fireplace. "Is that why you invited me in?" "Gus, you missed helping people?" "Partly," Samuel admitted. "But also because you looked like you needed help, and turning away from someone in need goes against everything I believe in. My parents were immigrants who barely spoke English when they came to this country. They survived because strangers were kind to them, because people saw their humanity instead of their differences. What would your parents think of you now?" Elena asked. Samuel smiled. "They would say I was finally learning the lessons they tried to teach me my whole life, that we're all connected, that kindness is never wasted, that sometimes the smallest gesture can change everything." Elena felt something shifting inside her chest, a loosening of the tight knot of despair that had lived there for so long. Sitting in this warm house, talking to this kind man who saw her as a person worth helping, she felt a spark of something she had almost forgotten: hope. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "For the food, the warmth, for listening to me complain about my problems." "You don't need to thank me," Samuel replied. "But maybe you could do something for me." "Of course, anything. Let me help you find a job. I know this town, I know the people, and I have connections from my years as a librarian. Sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know, and I'd like to share my connections with you." Lena stared at him in amazement. "You would do that? For someone you just met?" "Elena," Samuel said gently, Kindness isn't about how long you've known someone. It's about recognizing when you have the power to make someone's life better and choosing to use it. The rain continued to fall steadily outside, creating a cocoon of intimacy within Samuel's house that made the afternoon feel suspended in time. Alina found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone in years, sharing not just her current struggles, but also her dreams and fears for the future. "I used to want to be a real journalist," she confided as they sat by the fire with fresh cups of coffee. "Not just writing obituaries and covering school board meetings for the local paper, but investigating stories that mattered, telling people stories in ways that made a difference." Samuel leaned forward with genuine interest. "What kind of stories about people like me, I guess. People who fall through the cracks when economies change, when industries disappear. I always thought there had to be more to the story than just factory closes. People lose jobs. What happens to those people? How do they rebuild? What do their struggles teach us about resilience and community? Those are exactly the kinds of stories that need to be told," Samuel said. "Have you been writing at all during these past 2 years?" Lena shook her head. "What's the point? There's nowhere to publish anything, and I can't afford to work for free when I'm barely keeping my head above water." "But writing isn't just about publication," Samuel pointed out gently. "It's about processing your experiences, understanding your world, keeping your skills sharp." Margaret used to sketch buildings even when she didn't have any architectural projects. She said it kept her mind limber and her eye trained. "I suppose I never thought about it that way." Samuel stood up and walked to one of his bookshelves, running his finger along the spines until he found what he was looking for. "Here," he said, pulling out a leather-bound journal with blank pages. "Margaret gave this to me after she was diagnosed. Said I should write down our adventures together so I wouldn't forget. I never could bring myself to use it, but maybe it's meant for you?" Lena accepted the journal with reverent hands, feeling the weight of the gift both literally and figuratively. "I can't take this. It was meant for your memories with Margaret." "Margaret would have wanted it to be used by someone who needed it," Samuel said firmly. "She always said that unused gifts were like unsung songs. They couldn't fulfill their purpose sitting on a shelf." Alina opened the journal to the first blank page, imagining all the stories that could fill these pages. "Where would I even start?" "Start with today," Samuel suggested. "Write about walking in the rain, about finding shelter, about a conversation with a stranger who became a friend. Write about what it feels like to be seen and heard after feeling invisible for so long."
Guys.
The idea sparked something in Alina that she had thought was dead excitement about writing, about capturing a moment and making it meaningful through words. "You really think I should?" "I think you have stories that need to be told, Alina, and I think the world needs to hear them." As if summoned by their conversation about writing and purpose, the phone rang in Samuel's kitchen. He excused himself to answer it, and Alina could hear his side of the conversation from the living room. "Hello, Janet? Yes, I'm doing well." "Really?" She quit without notice. "That's terrible timing with the festival coming up, ... Well, as a matter of fact, I might know someone." Lena tried not to eavesdrop too obviously, but she couldn't help feeling curious about the conversation. When Samuel returned to the living room, he was smiling in a way that made her heart skip. "That was Janet Morrison from the Cedar Falls Historical Society," he said. "Their part-time assistant just quit unexpectedly, and they desperately need someone to help coordinate their upcoming Heritage Festival. It's not permanent, but it's 3 weeks of solid work, and Janet mentioned they might be able to extend it if the right person came along." Lena felt a flutter of hope, mixed with anxiety. "What kind of work?" "Writing press releases, coordinating with vendors, managing social media, interviewing longtime residents for historical profiles, basically. All the communication and organizational tasks that make an event successful. It's exactly the kind of work that would use your journalism skills. But they don't know me. Why would they hire someone with no experience in event planning?" Samuel's smile widened. "Because I've been volunteering with the Historical Society for 2 years, and Janet trusts my judgment. I told her about your background in journalism and your connection to the community. She wants to meet with you tomorrow morning." Alina stared at Samuel in disbelief. "Oh, you got me a job interview?" "Just like that?" "I got you an opportunity," Samuel corrected gently. "The job will depend on you and how you present yourself. But yes, sometimes that's how things work in a small town. People help people, especially when they know you're trustworthy. But you barely know me, Alina protested. How do you know I'm trustworthy? Samuel was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because in the 3 hours you've been in my house, you've been nothing but gracious and honest. You didn't try to take advantage of my hospitality. You didn't make up elaborate sob stories to win sympathy, and you didn't act entitled to help. You've been genuine and grateful, and that tells me everything I need to know about your character. Alina felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll go to the interview tomorrow. Say you'll give yourself a chance to succeed. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not what they're looking for? Then you'll be no worse off than you were this morning, Samuel pointed out. But what if you don't mess it up? What if this is exactly the opportunity you've been waiting for? Alina looked around Samuel's warm, welcoming house at the journal in her hands. At this kind man who had appeared in her life like an answer to prayers she hadn't even known she was praying. For the first time in 2 years, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. Okay, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. I'll go to the interview. Good, Samuel said, settling back into his chair with obvious satisfaction. Let's talk about what you're going to wear and how you're going to present your experience in ways that show, Janet, exactly why the Historical Society needs you. As they began planning for tomorrow's interview, Alina realized that something fundamental had shifted inside her. The hopelessness that had been weighing her down for months was lifting, replaced by something she had almost forgotten existed, the possibility of a better future. Outside, the rain was finally beginning to ease, but neither of them seemed to notice. They were too busy planning Alina's comeback story. By evening, the rain had stopped completely, leaving the world outside fresh and clean, with puddles reflecting the warm glow from Samuel's windows. Alina's clothes had finished drying hours ago, but neither she nor Samuel seemed eager to end their conversation. They had moved from discussing her job interview to sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, and the unexpected turns their lives had taken. I should probably head home, Alina said reluctantly as she noticed the darkness falling outside. You've already done so much for me today, and I don't want to overstay my welcome. You're not overstaying anything, Samuel assured her. But I understand if you need to get back. Let me at least drive you home. It's getting dark, and those sidewalks will be slippery after all this rain. Alina started to protest that she could walk, but something in Samuel's expression told her that refusing his offer would actually hurt his feelings. If you're sure it's not too much trouble, no trouble at all. Besides, I'd like to know you got home safely. As they prepared to leave, Samuel handed Alina a small paper bag, some leftover soup for tomorrow, and a few other things you might need. Alina peeked into the bag and saw not just a container of soup, but also some fresh bread, a small jar of honey, and some tea bags. Her throat tightened with emotion at his thoughtfulness. Samuel, you've already done so much. It's just food, Alina. Food is meant to be shared. The drive to Alina's apartment building took only 10 minutes, but it gave her time to process everything that had happened during this extraordinary day. This morning she had been a desperate woman walking in the rain with no prospects and little hope. Tonight she was someone with a job interview tomorrow and a friend who believed in her potential. That's my building, Alina said, pointing to a tired-looking complex that had seen better days. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. Samuel parked and walked her to the entrance, though Alina tried to convince him it wasn't necessary. Old habits? He explained with a smile. Margaret used to tease me about being overly chivalrous, but some things are ingrained. At the door to her building, Alina turned to face Samuel, searching for words adequate to express her gratitude. I don't know how to thank you for today. You've saved my life in ways you probably don't even realize. You don't need to thank me, Samuel said, echoing his words from earlier. But there is something you can do for me, if you're willing. Anything. Promise me that you'll remember this day not as charity or pity, but as what it really was. One person recognizing the worth in another person and acting on it. You didn't need saving, Alina. You just needed someone to see you clearly. Alina felt tears threatening again, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than despair. I promise. Promise me you'll call me after your interview tomorrow, regardless of how it goes. I'll be worrying about you until I know what happened. Alina smiled. realizing that she had gained not just a job opportunity, but also something she hadn't had in years, someone who cared about her well-being. Dada promised that too. That night, Alina climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her small apartment with more energy than she had felt in months. Her apartment was still cold and sparse, still reflected the reality of her financial struggles. But somehow it didn't feel as hopeless as it had that morning. She heated up some of Samuel's soup on her small stove and ate it while writing in the journal he had given her. The words came easily, flowing onto the pages as she described her day, her feelings, and the unexpected kindness of a stranger who had restored her faith in human goodness. Today I learned that angels sometimes appear as lonely widowers with warm houses and generous hearts, she wrote. I learned that kindness is not a weakness, but a strength, and that sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person willing to see another person's worth. She wrote until past midnight, filling page after page with thoughts and observations she had been storing up for months without realizing it. The act of writing felt like coming home to herself, like rediscovering a part of her identity that had been buried under layers of disappointment and struggle. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the storm had washed the world clean and given everyone a fresh start. Alina dressed carefully in her best clothes, a navy blue blazer and matching skirt that she had bought for job interviews 2 years ago and hardly worn since. Looking in the mirror, she saw someone she had almost forgotten, a professional woman with intelligence in her eyes and confidence in her posture, the Cedar Falls Historical Society occupied a beautifully restored Victorian house on Main Street, complete with gingerbread trim and a wraparound porch. Alina arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time walking around the building, admiring the historical markers and getting a feel for the organization's mission. Janet Marson turned out to be an energetic woman in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of enthusiasm that made everything seem possible. She greeted Alina warmly and immediately launched into an explanation of the Heritage Festival and the Society's goals. Samuel Chen speaks very highly of you, Janet said as they settled in her cluttered but organized office. He says you have exactly the skills we need and the kind of character that would make you a perfect fit for our team. Samuel is very kind, Alina replied. But I hope I can prove worthy of his recommendation based on my own merits. Tell me about your experience with journalism, Janet requested. And Alina found herself speaking with confidence about her work at the newspaper, her passion for storytelling, and her understanding of how to connect with community members. The interview lasted an hour, during which Alina felt increasingly excited about the possibility of working with the Historical Society. The project Janet described, documenting the oral histories of longtime residents, creating promotional materials for the festival, helping preserve the community's heritage, combined her love of writing with her connection to Cedar Falls. The position is yours if you want it, Janet said as they shook hands at the end of the interview. Samuel was right about you. You're exactly what we need. Can you start Monday? Alina felt a surge of joy so intense she almost laughed out loud. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Walking out of the Historical Society building, Alina felt like she was floating on air. She had a job, a real job that would use her skills and pay her bills and give her a chance to contribute something meaningful to her community. More than that, she had hope again, and a friend who had believed in her when she couldn't believe. In herself, she couldn't wait to call Samuel and share the good news. Alina walked to the nearest payphone with steps that felt lighter than they had in months. She dialed Samuel's number with shaking fingers, her heart racing with excitement and gratitude. Samuel, it's Alina. I got the job. His delighted laughter filled her ear, and she could hear the genuine happiness in his voice. That's wonderful. Now, Janet would see what I saw in you. Tell me everything. What did she say? When do you start? Alina found herself talking rapidly, sharing every detail of the interview while strangers passed by on the sidewalk, probably wondering why someone was so animated while talking on a payphone, but she didn't care who heard her. She wanted the whole world to know that sometimes wonderful things really did happen to people who needed them most. Monday morning at 9, she finished. Janet wants me to start by interviewing some of the oldest residents about their memories of Cedar Falls. She said she's been wanting to create an oral history project for years, but never had someone with the right skills to do it properly. It sounds perfect for you, Samuel said warmly. Using your journalism background while helping preserve the community's stories, I can't think of anything more suited to your talents. Samuel, I can never repay you for this. If you hadn't invited me in yesterday, if you hadn't made that phone call to Janet, ... Alina, Samuel interrupted gently. You earned this job yourself. It might have opened a door, but you're the one who walked through it and impressed Janet with your qualifications and character. Don't diminish your own accomplishments. That afternoon, Alina returned to Samuel's narrow house. This time not as a desperate stranger seeking shelter, but as a friend bringing news and gratitude. Samuel welcomed her with the same warmth as the day before, but now there was an additional element, pride in her success that felt like the approval of a caring family member. We should celebrate, Samuel announced, leading her into his kitchen. I was thinking of making dinner anyway, and good news always tastes better when it's shared. They spent the evening cooking together, with Samuel teaching Alina his recipe for homemade pasta, while she told him more about her plans for the oral history project. The easy companionship that had developed between them the day before continued to grow. And Alina realized that she had not only found employment, but also discovered something equally valuable: genuine friendship. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, Alina said as they sat down to eat. About writing, about keeping my skills sharp even when there's nowhere to publish. I started using that journal you gave me, and it feels like I'm rediscovering part of myself that I'd lost. What kinds of things are you writing about? Everything. Yesterday's rain, our conversation, what it felt like to be seen and heard after feeling invisible for so long. But also bigger things. Observations about what happens to people in communities when industries disappear. Thoughts about resilience and hope, and how kindness can literally save lives. Samuel set down his fork and looked at her with serious attention. Those sound like exactly the kinds of stories you wanted to tell as a journalist. Have you thought about sharing them somehow? Who would want to read them? I'm nobody special, just another unemployed person with opinions. Alina, that's exactly what makes your perspective valuable. You're writing from the inside of an experience that affects millions of people. Your stories could help others feel less alone, could help people who haven't experienced job loss understand what it's really like. That's important work. Over the following weeks, as Alina settled into her new position at the Historical Society, she and Samuel developed a routine of having dinner together twice a week. These evenings became the highlight of Alina's week, filled with conversation, laughter, and the kind of comfortable companionship that felt like family. Alina thrived in her new job, discovering a talent for drawing stories out of the elderly. Residents she interviewed, Mrs. Henderson told her about running the town's first telephone switchboard. Mr. Kowalski shared memories of the factories in their heyday when Cedar Falls was a bustling industrial center. Each story Alina collected was a piece of the town's identity, a thread in the tapestry of community history that she was helping to preserve. You have a gift for this, Janet told her after Alina's first month on the job. The way you connect with people, the way you make them feel comfortable sharing their memories, it's exactly what this project needed. I'd like to discuss making your position permanent. That evening, Alina practically floated to Samuel's house with the news. She found him in his small back garden, finally succeeding with a row of healthy tomato plants that were heavy with ripe fruit. Look at that, Alina marveled, examining the thriving garden. Your grandmother would have been proud. What changed? Smiled, his hands dirty from working in the soil, but his face peaceful. I started talking to them, just like you suggested. Told them about my day, asked them how they were feeling, treated them like they mattered. Amazing what a difference a little personal attention can make. That sounds familiar, Alina laughed. It's the same principle that works with people. That night, as they shared a meal made with tomatoes from Samuel's garden, Alina realized how profoundly both their lives had changed since that rainy day when she had knocked on his door. Samuel had rediscovered his capacity for nurturing and connection, while she had rebuilt her sense of purpose and self-worth. I've been thinking about something, Alina said as they cleaned dishes together. That journal you gave me is almost full, and I've been wondering if maybe it's time to think about sharing some of those stories. Not for money or fame, but because they might help other people. I think that's a wonderful idea. What did you have in mind? The Historical Society has a newsletter that goes out to the whole community. Janet said I could write a regular column if I wanted to. I was thinking of calling it Stories from the Storm, Pieces about Resilience. Community, the ways people help each other through difficult times. Samuel's face lit up with enthusiasm. Margaret always said that the best stories were the ones that reminded people of their shared humanity. Oh, I think you found your calling, Elena. 6 months later, Elena's column had become the most popular feature in the Historical Society's newsletter. Her stories about job loss, unexpected, kindness, and the power of human connection resonated with readers throughout Cedar Falls and beyond. Letters arrived regularly from people sharing their own experiences and thanking Elena for helping them feel less alone. One evening, as rain began to fall outside Samuel's warm house, Elena looked up from her writing to find him watching her. With a soft smile, "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I was thinking about that day you showed up on my porch, soaked and shivering and looking like you'd lost everything. I was thinking about how sometimes the best things in life come, disguised as problems that need solving." Elena set down her pen and looked around the cozy room where she now spent so much of her time at this man who had become like family to her, at the life she had rebuilt from the ashes of her old one. "You know what I was thinking?" she said. "I was thinking about how my grandmother used to say that kindness was never wasted, that every act of compassion ripples out into the world in ways we can't imagine. She was right. Your kindness to me didn't just change my life. It changed the lives of everyone who reads my stories, everyone who finds hope in them." Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside Samuel's narrow house, two people who had found each other in a storm continued to create warmth and light that would spread far beyond these walls, touching lives they would never know about in ways they could never fully measure. Sometimes, Helena reflected, the most important moments in life begin with the simplest acts of human decency. Like opening a door to someone standing in the rain and whispering, "If kindness won't hurt, come in."